Hi, Weather Joey here with your bottom of the South Island seasonal recap for 2020. Now I'm filming this in the late December, actually the day before it turns to 2023, and that's because never got caught up on these things. Been planning on doing seasonal forecasts the whole way through, and we did a couple, but I'm getting caught up. I'm going to start with spring 2020 because that's when I started putting forecasts out there. Now, my uncle, otherwise known as Weather Tom, he did seasonal forecasts all the way back to the early 40s when good consistent records were starting to be kept track. Looking back over the data, seasonal forecasts there, so I have access to all those. Also the ones he did in detail all the way back to the late 90s. So I'm doing my own here from 2020 on. This is the spring 2020 now. For me, seasonal changes are a time for me to go out into the wilderness and give my thanks and say, and you guys know this out here, to give my thanks and a heartfelt thanks. It's something that I've found valuable in my life, and it helps me mark the changes of the season. As we go into spring, we let go of winter, and we see winter quite often slowly, glimpses of spring, and then back of winter. And so there's a certain time when it feels like now's the transition, and I'll be talking about those over the years, over time. But what am I trying to say with that? These seasons are an important time, and it's a good way every 4 months to keep track of how the elements change. How for spring, the light is increasing, the water is decreasing, the air is moving and heating, and the earth starts to regenerate. And we see the earth ooze up with all these elements of light and using water and the breath of air, and earth starts to produce. So that's what we see in spring, is new beginnings as we look to the east and find new light. So let's go back over 2020. Let's see. I'm going to start first of all with the general recap and then go into the more detailed recap. So these are all written down. That's why I'm reading them. My eyes aren't as good as they used to be. Like I'd have to be... That's an early start to that. Apparently it starts later for some people. Anyway, so spring of 2020. Now, just to mention, we did see from spring about 6 years up until the spring of 2019, early starts to summer, and those were May starts, particularly early starts for declaring the meteorological summer. In spring 2020, that kind of went back a little bit. So here's your general overall recap. Spring is slow to start in 2020 as cool February weather continues throughout much of March with a dry west-northwest to northwest/north flow. March is really all winter. Dry weather continues well into April, becoming one of the longest early spring dry stretches in 40 to 50 years. Now this would be worrisome if not for a decent snowpack. Late April, early May brings much needed rain. Then a mid-May heat wave looks like an early summer again, but spring makes a return and carries on through to mid-June. So that's the overall synopsis, and here are some of the details. Spring 2020 is slow to start as cool February weather continues throughout the first half of March, courtesy of a west-northwest to north flow. We see a few showers here and there with cool weak fronts moving through, but it remains mostly dry. This cool northwest flow continues through the last half of March and on into early April with showery, cool systems diving down the coast, interspersed with clear, dry days. As we get further into the second week of April, this north flow dries up with high pressure parked off the BC coast. It's cool at first, then really starts to warm up by mid-month. This is becoming one of the longest early spring dry stretches in 40 to 50 years, as we mentioned. By the last 10 means the last 10 days of April, the offshore ridge that has brought All this dry north flow crosses the coast, flattens out, with a new low pressure entering the Gulf of Alaska. We see a shift into a much wetter west-southwest to southwest flow that sticks with us into early May, bringing much needed spring rain. By the second week of May, strong ridging over the U.S. West Coast brings an end to moisture and brings clear skies and hot summer weather for the May Day long weekend as the ridge pushes up over most of BC, and it's a May heat wave again. You'll see some of those in the records in the past. This summer weather is short-lived, however, as we return to spring weather for the mid-10 of May, and something wet with cool wet systems mostly from the west-southwest to the southwest. Summer returns briefly with a nice ridge building in with this west-southwest flow near the end of May. A weird little Baja Lows, I remember this, moves north to interrupt this ridge, and behind that cool westerly flow around the low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska now brings a mix of sun cloud and light showers for much of the first week of June. Cool spring weather continues into the second week of June and gets wetter as low pressure offshore brings two significant fronts through before it passes over the coast. Behind, we see high pressure build in with support over the U.S. West Coast, marking the first summer day of June on the 17th and the start of our meteorological summer. That is spring 2020, and actually it's the start of a bit of a trend for springs away from those early summer starts we talked about. But we'll get more into that in spring 2021, which is coming up in just a second. Anyway, may the season be with you, my friends.